The first time I knew something was really wrong was when I saw my own private property sign drifting down the creek like a sad little float. I watched it bump against the bank spin once and catch on a low branch like the water was trying to hand it back to me. And standing 50 feet downstream like they owned the place were 3 members of the Homeowners Association fishing on my land. My name's Ethan Parker, and I bought a quiet slice of property tucked behind a curve of woods on the edge of our North Carolina neighborhood. The listing was simple, peaceful, private creek access, but the real gold was in the paperwork. Deeded creek rights in plain English, legally mine from the footbridge down to the old oak bend. I didn't buy a community amenity, I bought part of the creek. The Homeowners Association knew it too, because I made sure they knew it politely at first. I showed the documents, pointed at the boundary markers, even offered the kind of neighborly smile that says, "Hey, I'm not here to start drama, just don't touch my stuff." Then Diane Mercer became president of the HOA, and that smile turned into a survival tactic. Diane was mid-50s, always wearing that I'm in charge posture, like her spine came with a built-in clipboard. Perfect blowout hair, big sunglasses, iced coffee in hand, she walked our street the way a mall cop walks a food court. Last month, she tried to tell me my shed windows were too reflective. 2 weeks ago, she left a note about my mailbox not being regulation, even though 3 other mailboxes on our street looked exactly like mine. But the creek? That was the line she didn't just cross. I stepped down the bank, picked up my dripping sign, and stared at the scene like I'd wandered into the world's dumbest luxury picnic. Diane was lounging in a folding chair with 2 board members, Linda and Cheryl lines cast into my creek, a cooler beside them, and a little Bluetooth speaker whispering soft jazz like this was some backyard spa day. I cleared my throat loud. Diane turned slowly, smiling, like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror. "Oh, hey, Ethan," she said, sweet as syrup and twice as fake. "We figured since it's just a little creek it wouldn't hurt to enjoy it as a community. It's not like you're using it every day." I held up the sign in my hand, water dripping off the laminated edges. "Let me stop you right there," I said. "This is private property. You're trespassing." Linda snorted like I'd told a joke. "Don't be dramatic, it's just water." "Funny," I said, and my voice stayed calm even though my chest was tight, because my deed says otherwise. I pulled a laminated copy of my creek rights page from my pocket. "Yeah, I keep it ready because I live around these people. Creek rights belong to me," I said, pointing at the language. "Bridge to Old Oak, that's the boundary." Diane rolled her eyes with the confidence of someone who has never been told no in her entire life. "Well, we voted last month to open it up to HOA members. Community access was approved." I stared at her. "You can't vote to give away something you don't own." She waved her hand like she was shooing a fly. "Don't be difficult, Ethan. We're not harming anything. Besides, we've been coming here for weeks." Weeks. That word hit like a punch. I didn't argue anymore because I didn't need to. I turned, walked back up the bank, and headed to my house with my jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. Because I had cameras. When I bought the place, I installed 4 cameras across the back lot myself, wired, buried, and fed into a private server. Not cloud-based, not smart home, nothing anyone could casually hack with a password reset. I sat at my kitchen table, pulled up the creek feed, and waited. The footage loaded slow, and my impatience turned into dread the second the first clip popped up. There they were again, different day, different angle, and this time they weren't just fishing. They had a chainsaw. 3 weeks earlier, bright morning Diane and 2 men from the HOA committees, Brad and Troy, walked straight onto my land and cut down my dogwood by the water, my tree. They dragged it like it was trash, then set it up as a bench like they were landscaping a resort. 2 days later, they came back with bags of gravel and dumped it along the muddy path leading down, changing the grade like this was some beautification project. Then, the rope swing. They tied it off to the low sycamore like a summer camp, and on another clip there were kids, 6 of them at least, splashing in the creek while the adults sat back with beers like proud supervisors. I leaned back in my chair and just stared, and that's when the doubt crept in, quiet and poisonous, because part of me wanted to shut the laptop and pretend I never saw it. Part of me thought maybe I'm being too rigid. Maybe this is just how neighborhoods work. Maybe I'm the outsider for saying no, and maybe I'm about to become that guy everyone whispers about. I could almost hear it. Ethan's the problem. Ethan's not a team player. Ethan thinks he owns water. For about 10 minutes I sat there fighting myself. My stomach churned, my hands went cold, and I actually wondered if I should just let it go. Because fighting the homeowners association feels like fighting fog. It wraps around you, wears you down, and somehow makes you question reality. Then I saw the timestamp on the Dogwood video again, and my anger came back clean sharp and deserved. They didn't borrow my creek. They altered my land, endangered children, and treated my property like a neighborhood clubhouse. So I started moving. I printed stills from the footage, clear shots, timestamps, faces, and locked the originals in a fireproof box. Then I made 2 calls. First to my friend Lena Brooks, a real estate attorney who used to work as a county prosecutor. Second to the sheriff's office. By late afternoon, Deputy Collins stood in my backyard, arms crossed, watching the footage on my tablet. He didn't talk for a while, just watched, and when the dogwood hit the ground, he exhaled through his nose like he was trying not to swear. "Yeah," he said finally, "this is going in the report." I swallowed. "Can you cite them?" He looked at me. "We're past citations. You want to press charges?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." Deputy Collins nodded once. "Criminal trespass, property damage, and if they invited minors onto private property without permission, that's another problem. I'll file it. You'll have a case number in the morning." That night, Lena called me back with her lawyer voice calm, confident, dangerous. "I reviewed your deed," she said. "Your creek rights are airtight. The tree was well inside your boundary." Then she paused, and her tone shifted. "Also, I pulled the HOA jurisdiction map filed with the county." I frowned. "Okay." "You're not in it," she said. "Your parcel sits adjacent to the HOA boundary, but it's not legally included, which means they've been sending you warnings and acting like they govern you without authority." My throat went dry. "So, all those notices," fraudulent Lena said. "At best harassment, at worst, a pattern." For the first time all day, I actually smiled, because Diane didn't just trespass. She overplayed her hand. 2 days later, citations were served to the people caught on camera, including Diane. Word spread fast, the way suburban gossip always does, like smoke, quick and unavoidable. My neighbor Frank wandered over while I was unloading groceries and said, "You really got 'em served." "Sure did," I said. Frank whistled low. Heard Diane tried yelling at the deputy like he was a waiter who forgot her ranch dressing. I almost laughed, but my nerves were still humming. She picked the wrong creek. Over the next few days, neighbors started knocking quietly at first. A nurse named Jasmine told me the HOA threatened her with daily penalties over parking too close to her mailbox, even though her driveway met city code. A young couple brought a pie and asked if my lawyer could maybe look at their bogus fines. So I made a folder on my computer. Then I made another. Then I made a shared drive with Lena's approval. Because it wasn't just my problem anymore. The HOA called an emergency meeting at the community center. I didn't attend, I wasn't even technically a member, but Lena went as my legal representative and she brought packets. Inside each packet, the trespass report, my deed, the boundary map proving Diane had no authority over my parcel, and a formal notice stating that any further contact or enforcement attempts would be treated as harassment under state law. Lena told me later, Diane's face went the color of overripe cranberry sauce. The fallout was swift. Brad resigned. Troy tried pretending he only went once. Linda suddenly had amnesia. Cheryl acted like she'd never heard of the creek despite being on camera with a fishing pole in her hand, and the sheriff's office didn't care about their excuses. The fines landed hard, over $15 grand total, and because they acted under the HOA banner, they couldn't use community funds to pay it. Personal liability. Out of pocket. That should have been the end. But people like Diane don't accept consequences. They escalate. 3 days after the meeting, a white SUV with tinted windows sat at the edge of my property for 10 minutes idling. The driver took photos of my creek, my new dogwood sapling, my mailbox, then drove off without a word. Lena confirmed it the next day. The HOA's law firm filed a property reassessment request, she said. They're trying to trigger a zoning review to create doubt about your boundaries. Classic. When cornered, Diane couldn't win on truth, so she tried to win on paperwork. Except this time, the county planning department already had my case tied to the sheriff's report. An inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, not to investigate me, but to start auditing the HOA's own compliance. He walked the creek line, pointed out survey flags I hadn't noticed, and said, "You're clean." But their community garden, it's encroaching on county land by about 20 feet. He took photos and left, and I didn't ask what happened next because I could feel it. The whole thing was collapsing. Then the state got involved. Environmental officials flagged the gravel as disruption to a protected runoff channel. A cease and desist hit the HOA for unauthorized alterations near a waterway. And once the HOA's attorney realized Diane had withheld key facts, he withdrew representation so fast it felt like a cartoon. That's when the real rot surfaced. The state opened an inquiry into their fines and enforcement, especially against non-member properties. Subpoenas went out for bank records and internal emails. And buried in those emails were reimbursements Diane and her buddy Brad approved for maintenance equipment that never existed, thousands of dollars routed through a landscaping company owned by Brad's nephew. Diane didn't get to hold another meeting. She got arrested. 2 weeks later, early morning, no sirens, just cruisers and quiet. She was escorted out in a robe, yelling about misunderstandings while her neighbors watched from behind blinds. Brad was charged too. The HOA operating account was frozen, and the board, what was left of it, started resigning like rats leaving a sinking ship. I thought that would be the final nail. Then I opened my mailbox on an unusually warm Thursday and found a certified letter from the county tax assessor. It said my property had been flagged for unreported structural additions related to recreational use, and a reassessment was scheduled for the following week. Attached was a blurry aerial photo of a wooden platform, one I didn't recognize. For a second my heart sank. I actually thought, what now? What did they say I built? Then I looked closer and my blood turned to ice. It wasn't on my land. It was downstream on the county-maintained greenbelt. And the permit request tied to it used my parcel number. Someone had forged my property ID to build on public land. Lena didn't even sound surprised when I called. "That's fraud," she said. "Real prosecutable fraud." We pulled the permit logs, and there it was, signed by one of Diane's loyalists using my lot number like a stolen credit card. The footage showed workers assembling the platform fast, like they were racing a clock. Deputy Collins returned with a county land rep, and after 10 minutes of quiet discussion, she looked at me and said, "They misfiled the permit under your parcel. That's identity misappropriation. They're lucky they didn't run power lines." The next morning, the woman who signed the permit was arrested before sunrise. And that was the moment the neighborhood finally understood what I'd been dealing with. This wasn't strict enforcement. This wasn't keeping standards. This was a power grab dressed up as community management. Within days, additional warrants went out. Personal assets were frozen to secure restitution. The county dismantled the platform, boxed the signage as evidence, and restored the land back to native growth. Then the remaining board members held one last vote. Not to restructure, not to pause enforcement, to dissolve the HOA charter entirely. Because once your leaders get hauled away in handcuffs, it's hard to keep pretending the problem was mailbox regulations. I went down to the creek one more time and stood at the bend where my dogwood used to be. The water moved the same way it always had, steady, indifferent, like it had watched all of this and was ready to forget it. Me, I wasn't ready to forget. But I did learn something. Power only thrives where people stay quiet.